Hello everyone, Andrew here, and welcome to the first pick-up video of 2016. Since the year has began, I have picked up quite a few interesting things, so I thought it was time to, gather them all on the couch here and show them to all you, because I know that people love to see what I have picked up recently. There's a whole bunch of cool things here, nothing actually too modern. It goes way back, even like before the NES, and then we have some Game Boy and some Super Nintendo stuff, but it doesn't really get too much newer than that, actually. Most of it is stuff that's from flea markets and local listings, although there actually are a few things which I found at thrift stores, because it seems like someone just, kind of dumped their collection off, which doesn't happen too often. Usually people these days, they see videos like mine on YouTube or on TV or, just anywhere on the internet, and they realize that video games have, definitely gone up in value. And just because it's from the 80s doesn't mean it's worthless anymore. It's actually worth more, depending on how old it is. So people definitely aren't just, donating their stuff as much anymore. They're either trading it into stores or finding some other way to sell it. But I did find some cool things, so we're definitely going to be looking at those today. It's funny, too, because recently I did an Intellivision video as well as some Game Boy videos. And after doing both of those, I then, only a few weeks later, proceeded to find things that would have fit perfectly into those videos, which is kind of a shame that I didn't have them then, but we're going to have a look at them now, because I did buy the Intellivision related ones, although I didn't buy the Game Boy one, but we'll talk about that when we get to them. Main thing is, though, just as in every pickup video that I do, if there are NES games to show, they usually are the first thing that we take a look at, and today I have two officially licensed NES games that I did not have in my collection before, as well as two kind of, unofficial ones, so like the Color Dreams ones and all that jazz. And official game number one is Godzilla 2, complete in the box. Now, Godzilla 2 is definitely one of those NES sequels that is way harder to find than its predecessor. So you have like Godzilla 2, Rescue Rangers 2, DuckTales 2, Power Blade 2. So pretty much if you ever see something that's not Mega Man or Mario with a number 2 at the end on the NES, grab it, because it's probably worth something. I mean, of course there's other number 2s too that aren't worth something, but you might as well. I mean, usually, probably a great game anyway, but typically NES sequels, just like the ones I listed off, typically aren't the easiest to find. So to have Godzilla 2 in the box is a pretty cool thing. So that's one of the NES games I have picked up recently. Next up, we have Color a Dinosaur, which is definitely one of the craziest NES games, or silliest rather, because all it is like a coloring book, where it's like really primitive Mario paint, but there's no mouse option, and you just kind of, you can draw freehand, but you can also just use like the paint bucket to fill in the spaces, and it's really basic. But it is one of the rarer NES games out there. I'm actually not sure why that is, if it had a low production run, or if just nobody bought it because it was not really that great of a game. But regardless, happy to be able to add that to my collection. The other two games we have to look at now are unofficially licensed ones, but I still like to pick them up anyway. I know that there are some people who only go for like licensed NES sets, which is totally understandable. I think it's cool to pick up the unlicensed ones as well, just because they're so bizarre and they're kind of like a part of NES history, just because of how strange they were and how companies like Tengen and Color Dreams would try to get their games out there without, slipping by the licensing. I think that's cool, and it's cool to own those games as well. But here we have Pestterminator, unlicensed game number 1, as well as Baby Boomer, which is one of the weirdest NES games I've played, where it's actually a zapper game, where you have to shoot things in the way of the baby to help it, get to the end. It's such a bizarre game. It is just so weird, but see, that's why, even though it's not licensed, I'm still happy to have crazy games like that as a part of my collection. But overall, my NES collection is getting pretty close to being complete, especially if you do only look at licensed games. The problem is that just NES games lately have been going up greatly in value. And I mean, a few years ago, back when I started, I wasn't going after the really expensive games. I was just kind of focusing on getting some of the cheaper ones. But I look back at it now, and it would have been smarter to buy some of the rarer ones back then and get a good rare collection built up, because I could have still probably easily gone for the common ones today. Because now, I mean, games that I'm missing, like, Little Samson. Actually, I have a list right here. They're all memorized, although I did print it off, because I know people are always asking me which NES games I'm still missing. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any. So I printed off a list to make sure. As far as licensed games go, I'm still missing Bonk's Adventure, Dragon Fighter, Fire and Ice, Flintstone's Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, not a surprise, Little Samson, Panic Restaurant, Power Blade 2, Pro Sport Hockey, Rescue Rangers 2, see all these 2s I was talking about, Stadium Events of course, Swordmaster, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Tournament Fighters, Wacky Races, and Wayne's World. So I mean there's some of them on there. Like Swordmaster used to be like a $20 game, and now I think it's just recently hit the triple digits. So like, there's all these games where if I had bought them years ago, instead of just going after the cheaper ones, trying to go for quantity rather than quality, I guess it probably would have benefited, been a bit more beneficial to me, because I probably still could have gone back, because a lot of the cheaper games haven't really gone up too much, but the rarer games have gone up a lot recently, and it's not just NES, of course Super Nintendo is notorious for that as well. So yeah, it's kind of a pipe dream, I think, at this point, that I will ever actually complete the NES set, unless I just really, really, really feel like dumping my whole bank account on collecting some of these things. Which I don't really. I do think it's fun. Like, all of these games were bought locally. None of them were, I didn't buy them off eBay or anything like that. A lot of what you see down here is definitely, it's not like it all came from eBay. It was always about that local hunt, and that's definitely always been my favorite part of video game collecting. So, when, a game like Color Dinosaur comes up in a local listing, and I can just go over and get it somewhere locally, I think that's a lot of fun. I think it's more fun than just going on eBay and buying everything. So, that's kind of why I'm not in really necessarily any rush to complete this list. It will come when it comes, and if it doesn't, I can't complain with the NES set that I have. It was always my dream to complete it, and if it happens someday, cool, but I just don't feel like dumping, like, $10,000 on, or even more than that now, on Stadium Events, because it just keeps going up. But if I somehow accidentally came across it someday, that'd be totally cool. But otherwise, that is new NES stuff, which for new NES games is a lot more than I actually have gotten recently, so can't complain too much about that. But before I talk about the NES anymore, let's move on to something different. I recently did an Intellivision video, and in the comments, it's funny because people mentioned, oh, you didn't have, you don't have the Tele-games Intellivision, and oh, you don't have the adapter that lets you play Atari 2600 games on the Intellivision. So wouldn't you know, like a couple of weeks after filming the Intellivision video, I came across both of those things, and it's like, wow, that's crazy. So the first one right here is exactly that, the Atari 2600 game adapter. Has all your switches on the front here that the Atari 2600 have, like setting difficulty, black and white, and then you have the reset button, and game select, and yeah, it just plugs right into the side of your Intellivision. It looks a lot like, it's designed like the Intellivision 2, and looks really awesome when paired up with the Intellivision 2, although it does work with all versions of the Intellivision, it will still fit. And yeah, that's just a really, really, really cool little adapter there. Just like the ColecoVision had the Atari game adapter, the Intellivision had one too. Everybody wanted to be able to play Atari games, just because, Atari was definitely the biggest thing back then, so to be able to do that was pretty cool. Also, I picked up the Tele-games version of the Intellivision, unlike the Tele-games version of the Atari, which looks quite similar to the 6-switch version of the Atari 2600. I was shocked when I came across this and saw just how different it looked, because it's definitely not something that I'd ever seen in the wild before. Unfortunately, not in the best shape, like the gold has been rubbed off of the circle pad there. It's a bit scuffed up along the top, but it is just such a cool console that I grabbed it nonetheless. And yeah, it's just so silly that I did my Intellivision video, and then like weeks later I came across these two things that would have fit perfectly in that. But to all of you who mentioned it in the comments, thanks. Maybe that's like a good luck thing when people mention in the comments, oh, you don't have that. Because there's another thing, and we're going to talk about in a little bit too, that actually happened for, which is really bizarre, although I didn't buy that one, and we'll get into that reason when it comes. But anyway, I think I will move this off of the couch for now, so that we have a little bit more room to work here. People ask, like, unfortunately, I know that my background's not the greatest for videos like this, but it's just the most convenient spot to make videos, because I have room to put the camera in front of me, I have room to sit here, I have room to set this stuff all over the couch. Like, I would love to have, like, my NES games in the background, but the problem with that is that there's not much space in between my NES games and my glass cabinets for me to put my camera, so things are really close up, and it makes things a bit more difficult. But hopefully, the background, I guess I've been doing it for years now, but hopefully, maybe you'll still notice some new things back there every now and then when you watch it. But now, let's move on to some Super Nintendo stuff. I found all of these games at a thrift store. Unfortunately, I mean, they had some pretty decent games, but some of them weren't kept in the best condition. But let's see what we got here. I actually did not have Aero the Acrobat for Super Nintendo. I played it many years ago at a friend's house on the SNES, although I actually have had it for many years on the Sega Genesis, but it's just not something I ever had on the Super Nintendo before, and this one is actually in very nice shape. Also, we have Spectre, not related to the James Bond movie. Completely unrelated, but that is cool to have. Bazooka Blitzkrieg. This is actually a Super Scope game, which is pretty cool. You don't really see too many Super Scope games. You definitely don't hear about them very often, other than maybe like Yoshi Safari. So this one's pretty cool, although unfortunately label is a little bit messed up. Here we actually have Demon's Crest, which again unfortunately has a little bit of label damage at the top, but still a cool game to own. And then we have Natsume Championship Wrestling, which again the person did not take super great care of, but it's a game I did not have, so I picked that one up as well. That's the thing about thrift stores. I've been lucky, and a lot of the things that I have gotten from thrift stores over the years haven't been in too bad of condition. So I mean, obviously, I didn't buy all of this stuff new. Most of it was secondhand. A large chunk of it was secondhand, possibly third, fourth, fifth, sixth hand. So you can't be too picky sometimes with condition, especially when you just like never find stuff at thrift stores anymore. So that was why I decided to go for those, despite the fact that some of them weren't in the greatest shape. It was one of the first big thrift store finds that I had had in a while. Also, something I picked up recently is the Super Multi-Tap 2. Which is super cool, multi-tap for the Super Nintendo, pretty basic to understand, but it's shaped like Bomberman's head, which is pretty cool. You can see the diagram of it on the back there, because of course Bomberman, definitely one of the most classic games to play 4 players with. That's really cool. This was never released in North America, I don't believe, but it was really neat. Complete in the box. So I thought that I would pick that up. Because yeah, our multi-tap in North America was really boring, just like a rectangle with 4 ports on the front. But this was super cool, and it was definitely something that I had never seen before, so I decided to grab that. Moving on, let's move on to Game Boy. Now Game Boy is the next section that I want to talk about, where I did my Game Boy video, and I got like a bajillion comments, so I don't get a bajillion comments. I get maybe there was like 20 or 30, which is cool, because I can actually reply to all of them. If I got a bajillion comments, it would probably be hard for me to reply to all of them. But I do like that, since I have a really cool fan base, so I can reply to each of the comments. I don't get totally overwhelmed, which is pretty neat. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, in relation to Game Boy, I got a lot of comments saying, "Oh, you don't have the Game Boy Light." And then I would reply saying, "Yeah, I've never seen one out in the wild, and I haven't really felt like getting one off eBay, but if I ever saw one in the wild, I would totally buy it." So what do you know, like a week after that video, I go to a flea market, and what do they have but a Game Boy Light? Now, I was totally, okay, I'm totally buying that, but it was in really bad shape. Like, the whole outside was scuffed up, the screen wasn't very good. It had the battery cover, but even when you opened up the battery cover, someone had, like, written their name inside in marker. And I was like, oh man, this is the first time I've ever seen a Game Boy Light in the wild, or not necessarily in the wild, but in person, and somewhere I can buy it locally, and I always said that if I was able to do that, I would buy it. But just the condition was so kind of that I decided to pass on it. But so that's just kind of a funny story though, how everyone's asking me about the Game Boy Light, and I'm always like, oh yeah, I don't have it, but if I ever saw one I would buy it. And then like a week later, after that video, that actually happened, but unfortunately I had to pass on it. But I did find a whole stack of Game Boy games at a thrift store, and there's a really nice stack of them here. So I am going to show you them. Again, it's actually, I did not have any games in this stack, and there's actually some some ones here that are not so rare and things like that. But the overall, the value of just a couple of them easily pays off what I paid for the entire stack. As the first one here is Snow Brothers, which some people may know is a very rare NES game. A slightly rare Game Boy game that I did not have, so I definitely grabbed that one. We have Gargoyle Quest by Capcom on the Game Boy. We have Final Fantasy Adventure. I actually did not have a single Final Fantasy game for the original Game Boy, just because they were not something that I played growing up. And they're something that I've definitely never really gone out of my way to buy, but I found, I believe, every single Final Fantasy game on the original Game Boy in the stack here. So Final Fantasy Legend, Final Fantasy Legend 2, and Final Fantasy Legend 3. It's really weird that Final Fantasy Adventure had this, this plain green background, and Final Fantasy Legend had, you know, a more detailed background with the sword and helmet and stuff like that. But then Final Fantasy Legend 2 kind of takes on the design that Final Fantasy Adventure had, and then that then continues into Final Fantasy Legend 3, where it kind of has this white border and then a little kind of square in the middle. Interesting, I found. I thought that was when I picked them up. Anyway, we have Double Dragon. We have Double Dragon 2. We have Wizards and Warriors. Wizards and Warriors X Fortress of Fear. We have Batman. Of course, a very good NES game. So to have the Game Boy version is very cool. We have Batman Return of the Joker. Also another NES game gone Game Boy. We have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Back from the Sewers. And we have, probably the most underwhelming of them all, Quicks. Of course, also an NES game gone Game Boy. But I mean, it was on many other things before the NES, of course, too. But overall, I do love the Game Boy, but it's definitely not something I've ever really gone out of my way to collect. So it's not like an NES, where it was always, if I went to a store and I saw NES games that I didn't have, I would really try to get them. I see Game Boy games all the time that I don't have, because there were just so many of them, and I only have like a couple hundred Game Boy games, when there are many more than that. But I don't usually go out of my way to grab them. But in this case, there was such an awesome collection that someone, you know, donated to a thrift store for some reason, that I just decided to go nuts and pick up all the ones that I didn't have, especially since, you know, ones like the Final Fantasies and Snow Brothers, totally worth it. It's not like I picked up, you know, a whole bunch of, you know, just shovelware games and sports and stuff like that. It was actually a very decent stack, so I thought that was really cool to come across. Also, Game Boy related, is this really cool Game Boy Color radio. Now, it's not actually like an accessory for the Game Boy, but it's just a radio that is shaped like a Game Boy, and it's official. So that's pretty cool. I thought that was really neat. And it comes with a whole bunch of different colors at the top. Like it shows, you know, white, purple, yellow, blue, green, and it looks pink, but maybe it was red or something like that. Overall, I thought that was really neat, so I decided to grab that. Also, related to the Game Boy is this Super Game Boy Nintendo. It's not really like a manual or like even like an instruction book or anything like that. It's just more like a guide. It goes over a whole bunch of different Game Boy games and ones that you can use on the Game Boy player to give special colors and you know, borders and things like that. I believe that this book came included with the big box version of the Super Game Boy. If you watched my Game Boy video, you saw that I have the small version of that box, like the almost normal Super Nintendo size version. Although I don't have the big one that's like the Mario Paint and Earthbound box size, which is really cool. I've always wanted to get my hands on that, although I've never actually seen that box in person. Although I did come across the book in mint condition. Like, there is nothing wrong with this book, not a single tear. It's not like frayed around the edges or cracked or wrinkled or anything like that. It is pretty much mint condition. So I grabbed this because, again, I just love books like this too, like, you know, old Nintendo powers and stuff. But if I ever come across that box that doesn't have the book, I will now have the book to put in that. Also, somewhere on the front here is the game that I plan to Let's Play after Donkey Kong Country. So let's see if you can find it. It's on here somewhere. We got Kirby, we got some Mario, we got some Zelda, we got some Wario Land, Metroid. One of those is the game that's coming up after Donkey Kong Country. Not like the day after it ends, but at some point in the near future, hopefully. If you've been reading the comments on various videos and you've seen other things that have happened recently, you might already know what game that is. But I'm actually really looking forward to playing it, because it's a game that I actually haven't beaten in like years. So yeah, looking forward to that, and hope that everyone else will too. There'll probably be more hints as to what that is in the near future. But for now, you can guess away unless you are one of the few people who might actually know, already know what the game is. Well, next up, I actually found this before I made the Game & Watch video that I've been talking about, that I've been wanting to make, which is pretty cool, because it would have sucked if I'd made that video and then found this like the week after. This like seems like, you know, the Intellivision and stuff, but Zelda, the Game & Watch, it's not even like The Legend of Zelda Game & Watch. It's literally just Zelda, which is I thought that was really bizarre. This was released in 1989, and I believe it was the second last Game & Watch game to ever be made. So we have it in the box here. It is a Nintendo DS, you know, double flip-top styled Game & Watch. We have the top screen up there with some stats and stuff, and then the bottom screen where the gameplay takes place. It plays like Zelda 2 more than Zelda 1, actually, where it's kind of a side-scrolling thing. But it's pretty cool. But I'm not going to talk too much about it now or show it. We'll talk more about my Game & Watches, which again are all along that shelf up there, during the Game & Watch video that I plan to make in the near future. But that is something that I have picked up recently. And unfortunately, just because of the way that it glares, you probably, even when I put it back on the shelf, you probably won't be able to tell. But yeah, we'll make a video about Game & Watches soon, and we'll talk about this and all the other crazy ones that I've picked up, because yeah, it's been forever since we have talked about Game & Watches, so I'm actually quite looking forward to that. But here we go. Last two things that I want to show are, so recently, I've heard that apparently tablet gaming has become this huge crazy thing, and everyone playing games on their tablet and stuff. So I finally cracked and decided that it was time that I found out what all of the rage was about. So I went out and bought my own tablet so that now I can play, you know, like Candy Explosion Quest or whatever it is that everyone's playing. On the Atari, because, you know, I'm pretty sure that's what people have been doing lately. You know, Atari is all of the rage again. People have put, you know, all the hate that they formed for Atari from the Jaguar off to the side and are now going back and reliving the classics now. So this is actually really, 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 really cool. So I definitely wanted to pick it up. So yeah, it's a tablet that you could use, you know, with older Atari computers like the 600 and all that stuff. And you could pretty much just make that, you know, just beautiful. Even on the back, it shows, you know, look at that wonderful art that they made. And I mean, I guess maybe that was like the only, of all the things that they made, that was the best looking one. So they put it on the front. I don't know. People who complain about, you know, paint and its lack of functionality, look at that and just be happy that art programs have come a long, 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 long way. But still, I thought that was really cool. And despite the fact that I'll probably never use it to create art, it is just such an interesting piece of Atari computer history that I am very happy to have that complete in the box. Just because, even just the box, it's like that is art. In the 80s, that is what people thought art was, and nobody complained. Now people are making, you know, web comics with like stick figures, and everybody just rants for days. It's crazy. And the last thing that I want to talk about is this track and field controller for Atari. Funny thing, I actually do not own Track and Field, the game, for the Atari. But I now have the controller, so it's actually kind of cool, because now I'm going to go and hunt for the game. I usually don't have too much motivation to hunt for Atari games, just because there's so many of them, and I already have a massive stack of them, and there's just not even like any more place for me to put them. So unless I see like games that really catch my eye or that are really rare, I don't usually buy Atari games, but this will give me something to go out and look for. So now, whenever there's like a box of Atari games, I'll fish through it to see if I can get my hands on Track and Field, because I do have the controller to use to play it. But with that said, we looked at some NES games, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Atari stuff, and some Intellivision stuff. And yeah, nothing really too modern in this video, but I mean, I definitely, you know, play and talk mostly about retro games, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Because yeah, I really haven't bought too much modern stuff. Like, I still don't have a PS4 or an Xbox One. And then yeah, there's not really too much other modern stuff to buy. I bought Mario Maker. I don't think I've really bought a current gen game since. It's crazy. It's crazy. Mostly playing the old stuff, which is good. You know, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I hope you enjoyed seeing this stuff. Yeah, next up might be that Game & Watch video, but I don't know, that might be a few weeks into the future. We'll see about that. Who knows what might happen, but in the meantime, I hope that you enjoyed this. And yeah, thanks for watching. So hope that you all enjoyed, and hope to see you next time for something different. So thanks, and see you later.